Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. In this episode, we have Tom Rossiter, co-founder of CatchCam Technology. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Jim. Thanks very much for having me on here. It's an honour, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be a pleasure. We'll have a yarn and a bit of crack, no doubt.
Yeah, definitely. If I could start, where did it all start for you? Where was life begin, and what school did you go to? Your studies?
Well, as you can probably tell from my broad accent, I'm not a local. Originally, I come from a place in southeast of Ireland, very close to Kilmore Quay. So I grew up around fishing boats. I think they've a phrase in Cornwall for them as pier pests, and I was one of them. But we also had a farm at home, so it was fishing and farming I grew up with. So I was never far away from work. I think I was probably reared on it, though. At times I probably tried hiding a little bit, but yeah, you were never far from it. And from a young age, Jim, I was out on boats. I remember the first time I went with my grandfather. I was about 5, and we went fishing for mackerel and pollock, and I had the rubber eel, and I lost it, and it came fast on the bottom, and I broke and whatever, and I was absolutely devastated. And of course, if I didn't have a hook, I wasn't going to catch any fish, and everybody else is pulling in fish around me, and I didn't have a thing for it. So that's maybe that's the way it started, and it went on perhaps. But yeah, that's when I started, and then from about the age of 10, I was kind of out with my father the whole time. Anytime I could, out at sea. Loved being at sea. Far preferred it to the farming side of things. And there was many a day the old fella would be kind of cowered with the rest of the lads behind the wall in Kilmore. And it's kind of protecting to the southwest, and they'd be sitting in there. And I'd put my head over it and I'd go, it's not too bad today. We could get going now. And he'd be, no, it lays off. Just give us another half hour. And so the two of us would be kind of pushing each other in the opposite directions. But yeah, for me, it was always about getting out to sea and being at sea and enjoying that end of things. And school-wise, well, I went there, and I dare say a lot of teachers probably wouldn't remember me for the good reasons, but I did a bit, learned a bit as I went along, but wasn't the best student in the world. Capable, but yeah, I think my mind was probably elsewhere a lot of the time, Jim. And yeah, that's kind of where I started out anyway.
That's fascinating to hear that. It reminds me, actually, when you're saying that about not the best. My mother used to tell me when I was older, she says, she says, we never had problems, much trouble with you. We never had police at the door or anything like that. She says, the only problem we had with you is getting you to school, because you used to say, Mom, I don't need to go to school. I'm going to be a fisherman.
And that was pretty much how a lot of us kind of thought. Like where I grew up, there were some fishing folk, but a lot of builders, and the guys just went, and well, I don't have to learn this. This is just, it's not relevant. I'm going to be driving nails into planks of wood in 6 months' time or a year's time or whatever. And it is and was hard to kind of apply yourself. But I suppose, look, back in them days, we kind of did know our mind a little bit better about where we were going and what we wanted to do. But I never got to do the job the way I wanted to do it. And like things, well, this was back in the kind of early 90s, and the turn the turn was happening, and fishing wasn't as good as it was going to be. And I was told firmly that, look, you need to go off and do something better for yourself. Don't be coming at this mugs game type thing. So yeah, kind of pushed me down the road education, and eventually I ended up finding myself in Aberdeen of all places. But it was kind of made complete sense to me because I wanted to do fishing. as my work, but maybe not, skippering or crewing a boat. And Aberdeen, well, we used to get the fishing news back in Ireland, and I'd be looking at Peterhead, and you'd see that just absolutely full of boats, and there was so many boats that had time stern to the wall, and I just could not get my head around this, and I had to go and see it. So up to Aberdeen wasn't any buying for me at all. I just look forward to getting up there, and I studied in the university, and kind of, I suppose, ever since I've been in and around fishing for the rest of my life. So yeah, that's kind of how it all came about.
I don't like taking people back or putting them on the spot, but when you say there about you're not a local and you can tell where you've come from, I've talked to a really good friend of mine, a skipper, Alan Addison of the Venture, and he reckons he was sitting at a table, some function, and the lad that from the west coast that goes on board boats with you.
Yeah.
He he reckoned that you were sitting at the table with a kilt.
Uh, I guilty as charged. And we're all Celtic. We're all Celtic cousins, and David Stevens is another prime example. There's a proud man that wears a kilt well. He's certainly got the build for it. But yes, I've got an Irish kilt. A bit like the whiskey, we fight over who had him on first, and all the rest. But yes, there is a tradition. It's much kind of less, I think, in Ireland. You'd rarely see an Irishman wearing a kilt, but we do wear kilts. And yes, I'm a proud Irishman, and I have an Irish kilt.
Well, you're talking about David Stephen. He was telling me last week it was a Cornish tartan. I asked him what tartan it was. It's a Cornish tartan. I should have said to him, you go to the Western Isles of Scotland and they'll tell you what to think of that.
There's Ed Wood.
Where, what, from your studies here, what took you into the CatchCam? What was that inspiration and how the idea came about?
Well, it's something I've always been interested. Like I said, I started at a young age, and I can remember being a young fella, and we'd be fishing and come home at night, and I'd be lying in bed, and I just dreamed about how to make a better lobster pot or a better hook or whatever, and that was always just in my mind. How could we do it better? Because there's got to be a better way. And so that's kind of, I suppose, driven me a lot in my life, regardless of where I've been. But using technology to help us kind of get along as really kind of pushed us, and that's kind of where it's come from with CatchCam. Was we were a guy you've had on here quite recently, Ian Whiteman, and really big part of it, and it's not Tom's ideas at all, and actually it's really important we go and we speak to the fishermen. Those are the guys that know the job and know what they need to do it better. And all you do is you kind of bounce ideas off them. And, Ian and I were out doing some work one day with lights and trying to see how the lights might change the behavior, the fish in the nets. And we need to see what's going on here. It's all well and good hauling up and seeing what's in the cod end, but there's a lot happens between when we put it in the water and when we take it out of the water. And no, you're right enough, Ian. Right, how would we go about doing that? And that's kind of really where the idea from the cameras came, and spent a lot of time with another very good fisherman up in the northeast, Sandy West on the Virtuous, and Sandy was fantastic. Like Sandy, there's no half measures with Sandy. If Sandy doesn't think it'll work, he'll tell you. And he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Gave us so much of his time and his thoughts, and was honest and hard when he needed to be. And it's guys like them, and there've been lots and lots of other guys right around the world that have kind of inputted into it. But it's not like I've had a dream and that's where it's come from. It's very much speaking to people and understanding what the problem is. You're far better off building a solution to a problem rather than building a solution and go and finding a problem, because, well, that business isn't going to succeed.
Yeah. And how do you envisage it going forward in the future?
Oof, I wish I knew. Technology's here to stay for sure, and that's not to say that we're going to have robots fishing in the future. There's an important place for the men and women out there, and the skill that these guys have. But in the modern world, there's things that are less acceptable than they might have been when you and I were young fellas. And we take far less risks, and the living conditions are much better and all the rest. So technology is important going forward. There's no doubt about that in my mind. And really, we've got to get the technology working for the fishermen and not at odds with the fishermen. So likes of cameras on boats, and that whether that's beneath the water or on the vessel itself, it shouldn't be about this big brother thing and wanting to know what he's up to and all the rest. It should be about, well, how can we use this? And a prime example, if you look at the modern fishing boats that we've got now, most, if not all of them, there's no longer a winchman. And you don't hear the shouting and hollering that used to go on in order to do it safely. The winch controls are in the wheelhouse, and to take Sandy Westboat as a prime example, Sandy's got a bank of screens, and he can see where every man is on the deck at every time. So if something needs to stop, he's the best place to do it. It's an incredibly safe environment. So there we have the camera technology in this case working to the benefit of the fishermen. Now, that's what we need going forward, and that's really where I want to see the kind of technology kind of build for the future.
If I could maybe just slightly take you back a bit, and the fact that you're from fishing as well as farming background, and you were saying there when you were wondering why you weren't catching the same fish as others around you. Is that when you had the inspiration, I need to see what's going on down there?
Well, I always so the best days I used to love fishing. So where we used to fish, Father and myself, we've got off of Kilmore Quay, you've got the Salty Islands. They're pretty famous, and then there's some actual big rocks and the Cunny Begs and the Barrels and Brandies and so on. And they're quite shallow areas, but there's two islands over towards Banno Bay called the Kirk Islands, and that was kind of our stomping ground. Now, we didn't have a flag on it, but everybody knew that's where we fished. And the bit that I loved was in the summer when you get a couple of fine days in the year, we get in really close, and you get so close that the water was shallow enough that you could actually see what was on the bottom. And a lot of times there was kelp and everything else, but it was obvious to me that if I could see what was on the bottom, I'd have a better idea where to put the gear. So the cameras, and seeing what's going down there just makes so much sense. And there isn't another job in the world where the guys are working blind. Yes, we know how deep the water is and all the rest, but we don't know what it looks like down there. And if you did, you would be able to do a better job. It's as simple as that.
Funny you should say that, Tom, because when you go back Well, when I go back, my father, their family boat, it was all family boats then. They were fishing new ground. They were one of the first boats to land fish on Kinloch Bervie, one of the first ever. Not and when they started going round, they went round from the east coast, Helmsdale fishing village I'm from.
Yeah.
They went round the top through over through the Fentland Firth down the west coast with a road map. And when they started fishing, they had lead weights on rope with grease on them, and they would put it down until they knew they were on the bottom. When it would up and down, hitting the bottom. When it come up, if there were sand, mud on it, sea netting, they were okay to fish here. If it was clean, it was hard bottom, and they they wouldn't fish there. That's how they started.
Well, many years ago, I was working at the Marine Lab. I was the first kind of social scientist in the Marine Lab, and I had the best job in the world, Jim. I had to go out and interview fishermen to try and get an understanding of why they did the job and what attracted them to it. Because ultimately fisheries management is about managing the people rather than the fish. The fish can manage themselves. It's what the people are doing is probably the difficult bit. So anyway, I had to go and speak to a lot of guys, and one guy I spoke to, and it was a real privilege. His name was George Leapier. He was from Aberdeen, and he was, when I spoke to him back in 2002, he was an old man. He was in his 90s, but he'd been fishing and was a skipper between the wars. And he went out with his father one time, who'd also been a skipper, and it was funny the way we were talking about that generational thing, and you know, he was out, as you know, kind of off Aberdeen. You get the hair, and when it comes down, and you know, it's you couldn't see the stem of the boat, let alone kind of work out where you are. And his father kind of said, calm down, and he pulled out the lead and he put a bit of grease on it and dropped it down, and he told him where he was, and he told him where to go to put the gear in the water and everything else. And you know, just the fascination that the men had the skill and the experience to be able to do that and do it with confidence. It wasn't like he was chancing his arm. He was really, really confident. And, you know, that was the day George said, you know, he realized he had a hell of a lot to learn. And kind of just, I'm thinking back, you know, one of the skippers, he says, when I was 16, I knew everything. And as every day goes by, I know less now because I know less. And it's you know, when you're young, you're full of enthusiasm and you've seen a little bit, but actually we know very little in the grand scheme of things. We're always learning.
I think that's true, Tom, but correct me if I'm wrong, but what I almost see with your role in this, and I say role rather than any describe it any other way, because it's almost like you're still in the industry. As far as your head's concerned, you're still in the fishing industry. And the fact that you've obviously got a flair and you understand technology and that, well, that's where that guy's, you talk about there, the George Leapers, they knew where to go and catch fish. But you know technology and how to take that in on the thing. Do you feel that's you?
Yeah, I think you're right there, Jim. It's something that I've been successful with. Like I worked at Seafish for 5 years and was involved in the R&D side of things there. And it was something I really enjoyed, where you take something from somewhere else and you apply it to our industry. So, fishing's only a very small industry in the grand scheme of things. There's stuff going on in other industries that can afford to do R&D and all the rest. And really, for us, it's how can we apply that into our industry to help our guys. And yeah, that's something I've kind of had some success with. But I think probably more important, Jim, I would say, is the ability to talk to people and understand. And I'm getting on a bit now, but I do get to see, and I count that as a really important part of my job. And I've been really fortunate. I've been to sea. I've done pretty much every job. I've fished in Turkey. I've fished in Greece. I've fished out Alaska. I've been in Australia, New Zealand. Uh, But every time I go or do that, I'm kind of learning and I'm seeing the job and I go, okay, I can see an opportunity here. And then it's talking to the people and it's sharing those ideas and kind of collaboration, as I call it, where we just work together because nobody's got all the right ideas. That's not possible. The best way
Yeah.
forward is working together, and that's in my career has kind of paid dividends. But I guess you've got to be open to it as well.
Yeah. No, I think it's very much the case of that's your 40, that's your role. And you see it that way. I think it's fantastic because what I like about that, Tom, is it's got everybody playing to their strengths.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the fishermen are good at what they do. I'm all right at what I do, but it's really about just bringing people together and working together and having that open mind to, you know, it's the sum of the parts is greater than the individual, and that's kind of what teams are about and team sports or whatever else. You've got some of the teams, and they're maybe you look at them on paper and you go, them guys aren't great, but actually when they get out on the pitch together and they work together and they work for each other, that's when they excel. And maybe the stars, sometimes you wonder, well, why isn't this team doing well? Because they've got all the big stars, but they're not a team, and they're not working together, and they're not pulling together, and
Yeah.
that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. The fact that you're basically as well, you're in two industries. You're in technology, and well, would you call it technology, and fishing, and there's trends with them all, and probably with technology, from what we understand, things are moving even quicker than they'll be moving in fishing. So it must be a balancing act for you as well.
Um, there's look, there's a hell of a lot happening very quickly, and just this start of 2025, we've seen in the AI world massive shifts with the kind of Chinese competitor coming onto the market. The main players in that market are also jostling for position. You've got lots of acquisitions going on, and it's near impossible to keep up with it all. But you've got to pick your area, and with CatchCam, what we've said is right. Let's be good at what we're good at, and let other people do what they're good at. So you do need to keep abreast of two things, but really where we're focused as a business is that niche side where we know that our kind of ability to give kit to fishermen or other users of the marine environment. But I'll tell you, the fishermen are going to be the roughest users because that's just the job it is. And if you can cut it in fishing, aquaculture, or some of these other industries are easy in comparison. Um, so if we can provide those guys with equipment that can be used day in, day out, then, we're in the right place. That's our niche. That's what we can do. And then it's about kind of supporting the fishermen as well around that, and taking the feedback when things don't go right, and seeing how we can improve on it. So yeah, we do have, I guess, an eye on both balls, but we wouldn't necessarily be kind of world leaders in camera technology or AI or some of the other things, but we are world leaders in terms of actually bringing that into the marine environment into a way that's kind of functional, that works for the fishermen, and gives them what they need. So yeah, that's kind of where we try to place ourselves.
How you must have some setbacks. How do you handle failure or setbacks?
Well, yeah, there's quite a few of them along the way. You've got to be resolute, and just maybe to go. I'll go back this time to the start when you asked me kind of where did I start out and everything else. The fishing is a fantastic education, and I really wish my kids could have had it, what I had, and farming to some extent, but fishing's more acute because you had to solve problems when you're fishermen. You're out there, you don't phone the AA if you break down. It's a lifeboat, and that's the biggest embarrassment of your life, having to been towed in by the lifeboat. Or that was certainly the way I was trained. Now, not to say that if we needed it, it was there and we were grateful for it, but it just drove you as an individual to solve problems. You will have setbacks. You'll bluter a net. You'll blow a hydraulic pipe or whatever, but you learn to fix things. You learn to kind of duck and dive and get home and get the job done and then get the repair done. And I suppose that's kind of something I've been able to take into my working life, my grown-up life, is the ability to maybe bounce back, or not necessarily see the problems as problems, but more as, right, there's going to be an answer here. This is a puzzle as much as anything else. And yeah, a bit of belief in yourself, and the fishing gave me that. There was one day, Jim, I remember very, very well, and we blew. So we had in the boat at the time, we had a lister, and it was water cooled, so it wasn't taking seawater. It was fresh water, like an engine on a tractor or a car, or whatever. And one of the pipes blew, and we had no way of fixing it. So what we came up with was, and the alternative was, yeah, we could have put the anchor out and called the lifeboat. But that was other working men that would have given their time up for us, and there was the ignominy of being seen to be brought in by the lifeboat. So the old fellow and myself, we kind of looked around, what had we? And we had a yogurt pot that we could cut the bottom of, and we could then mold that into a shape that we could then get a bit of a clamp over it. And then there was a rag put on the other end, and I had to hold that as we kind of steamed in. But we got in, and we got home. And that was a really kind of important lesson for me, that you can do it, and things will go wrong, but we've got it within us if we kind of just open our minds a little bit to actually solve the problems. And yeah, that's I think how I deal with it. But as I say, I've been fortunate to kind of have that type of upbringing and education.
Tom, I'm sorry. If you're not seeing me, but I've been working on my camera as you're talking there, and I can't get it on. But it's not affecting the recording.
I can hear you loud and clear, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. So we can carry on because it's not going to affect the recording in any way. Eh, how do you see, how does CatchCam integrate sustainability and sort of environmental responsibility into its technology?
Um, I guess in a number of ways, Jim. We think about that sustainability side of things when we're building the products. So we try and use the right materials that can be kind of recycled and reused. Um, we don't want to make the problem any worse. Thankfully, we haven't had, you know, many losses, and nobody wants to lose their equipment. But that comes in there. But really, it's for me, it's how the information coming from the cameras and the sensors we're making, how they can help the guys to fish more sustainably. Um, I read somewhere, and my own kind of, I suppose, belief is that a lot of the time we're not fishing very optimally. It's quite inefficient. Yes, it's getting more efficient all the time, but it's if you compare it to a farmer that sows a field of barley or beet or whatever, he goes out and he harvests it, and he takes every one when he goes into the field. He doesn't have one go 1 week and then come back 3 weeks later and have another go, and not that I'm saying we should be taking everything, far from it, but it's a lot of the time, when we look at what happens, and particularly in trolling, you will go from a place where you're maybe catching quite well. Then you start towing in another area where there's nothing, and then you'll go into another area where it's all right. Um, and you could be towing for 4 hours, but you might only be catching for 20, 30 minutes within those 4 hours. So, okay, well, what if you towed for an hour and caught for an hour? That's got to be better than towing for 4 hours and only catching for half an hour. And, you know, that's not something you're going to know as a fisherman automatically. You need assistance with that, and there's lots of technologies to help you do that. But I think that where we're coming from, we're trying to A, see what's down there, and B, understand what the sea's doing, and how that kind of affects your catch rate. That's really important, because then you have a far better chance of being in the right place at the right time. And then, if you get that bit right, and we'll go back to my example of the 1 hour versus 4 hour, well, that's less fuel you've burned. So your CO2 impact is reduced. Your gear's on the bottom less, so there's less benthic impact. And then, back onto the boat, potentially for the men and women on board, the work is better as well, because you're working for shorter periods, and the onboard conditions for people on the boats, they've got to be better to try and attract the young people into our industry. So yeah, that's kind of where I see it, Jim. Really, is it how we help people do their job better? That's where we can have the biggest impact. But we can also impact, I guess, in terms of the product itself, and make sure that we're not wasting kind of natural resources and so on.
And the CatchCam, it's on the net.
CatchCam is it can go anywhere. It literally can go anywhere, and that's what you know. Back in the day, we kind of set about was, right, we need something that can be really flexible here. And what I say to customers is, get it out there, get it used. Don't be afraid and put it in a cupboard and go, I'll just save that for a rainy day, because you'll not learn anything that
Yeah.
way. And I've probably been the most reckless person with them, and I've not broke one yet. And I've had them on and in scallop dredges. I've had it in beam trawls. I've had it down on the skid on a beam trawl and shoe, uh, on the fishing line foot rope on a trawl, um, cod end, you name it. We've kind of had it there, and the product we've designed and built is built to take that type of punishment that you'll get in these places. And the key thing, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this in public, but a lot of people have tried to build tech in the fishing world and similar to ourselves. And what they've tried to do is be tougher than the environment and be harder. So, stainless steel and make it 6 inch thick or whatever else. That doesn't work. And if you think and look at what the fishermen do, their gear is designed to go around things. If you look at the hoppers on a trawl, they're designed to ride over the top of stones and rocks, etc., not to beat them into submission and smash them. And that's very much, again, back to talking to fishermen and listening to fishermen. That's been our approach. Okay, if that works for the gear, then that's got to work for our stuff. So make it more flexible so they can get around these things rather than try and get through them. And yeah, that's very much how we've kind of approached it.
Now, this is going to probably sound a very silly question, but how does it work? Just say if it's in deeper water, because and I understand maybe the in the real deep water where the bigger boats are fishing for blue ling and stuff like that, it must be a lot darker. So will a camera pick that up?
And that's not a stupid question, Jim. Far from it. It's a very relevant question. And look, you're trying to do something in a challenging environment, aside from the I suppose the robustness side of things is right. How do we get this to work down there? And light is a very important kind of factor that we have to consider in all of this. And nature really impacts on how you do this. So actually, you could be in shallow water, but if the water is not very clear, or if it's at night, which a lot of the time it is dark, then you will need kind of artificial light into the environment in order to see what's going on. And it's not like we're used to living above the water in air and everything else. And if you go out for a walk with the dog, you take your flash lamp with you. You can get some really fancy ones now, and they can almost light up like a lighthouse for miles type thing. But that necessarily won't work underwater because you've got particulates in the water, and that very often and hopefully is just the kind of base level of the food chain. So you've got your phytoplankton, and I suppose the algae and all the rest. So that's in the water, and unlike air where you don't really have these particulates, water has it, and when the light kind of hits these, it gets reflected off them. So actually, the ability of light to pass through water, even what you might deem to be quite clear, is far, far less than what it is in air. So people are kind of surprised by that because they don't know any better. They've never had to deal with it. But that's a fact, and that's something we need to kind of handle. Then you get the different conditions, and you've heard it over the years in different parts of the country that they've got different names for it and whatever. But you'll get different colors in the water. The water can be blue, it can be black, it can be grey, it can be green, and that's all got an impact on how light can get through the water. So you are having to adjust how you capture those videos based on what light you can get. Now, having said all that, the best light you'll ever get is sunlight. And, well, how far would the sun go down? Some of the best footage I got was quite some time ago now, but it was out on east of New Bedford in the US, and I was out on a scallop boat, and we were 200 mile east, and there's some scallop banks out there we were working on, and we were working in 35 fathom of water, and it was early September, and I was like, right, okay, I'll need a good bit of light here. And the captain, Billy, Holbig was his name. Billy's like, yeah, it's 35 fathom will be, yeah, you'll need it. So we put it down anyhow. And lo and behold, actually the sunlight was penetrating. Oh, I've just seen that we've got a recording error there, Jim, come up on my end.
No, there's nothing here.
Okay. No, I'll keep going then.
I'm hearing you loud and
So,
clear.
yeah, I'll keep going in that case. Um, so yeah, we put out the camera, and lo and behold, at 35 fathom, we had clear sunlight on the seabed, and it was incredible. It just I did not expect to see it. So the conditions have a massive impact. But with our system, what we provide is a lamp to go with it, and you can control the amount of light then you're putting in to the environment in order to light up the picture. But it's a bit like there are some skills with it, and like if you go to a photographer and go into their studio and they've got these kind of umbrellas with light to get all the light right and everything else. You, I'm not saying that we've got underwater umbrellas, but actually putting the light in the right place becomes quite important. And there is a little bit of skill with that, and we try and make that as simple as possible. But if you don't light up what you want to see, then you're going to struggle to see it. It's as simple as that. So yeah, not a stupid question, Jim, and we could probably talk about it all day. It does get quite technical. And it's really our job to try and simplify that and give the guys the tools to do the job.
I remember I know it's with technology breakthroughs. A really good friend of mine in the Faroe Islands was saying when they were jigging with the jiggers, they discovered that they were obviously just mechanical and they were going out there putting their gear down. And then one of them came along with the modern electronic equipment. And his
Yeah.
catch rate was way, way greater than them. And they put it down to sound. And I've spoken since on a podcast with Jon Christensen, this fisheries scientist from Iceland, and he says they've actually proved it that fish can identify sound. So,
Oh,
is there
absolutely.
is there any sort of form of sound or wavelength, anything coming off the camera?
Not so much the camera. No, the camera's pretty silent. The If you put an artificial light into the environment, you do and will affect behavior of some of the fish. Um, and what you would see from time to time is actually the fish being really attracted to it and swimming right up to it and just bashing into it, type thing. But the sound side of things is it's a fascinating area that we don't really fully understand, and it's something I would like to get a little bit of time to look into. I think there is an untapped area there that can help with fishing, that really hasn't been looked for, and it makes complete sense. You pick up a fish, a cod, right? It's got eyes, it's got ears. What we don't really understand, like on its skin, there's pressure sensors, and there's thousands of these on the skin, so it can sense things that we can't. And as human beings, we kind of tend to take this arrogant view that everything's like us, and we can't. We only relate to them in the way that a human way, but we don't we really don't understand these animals, and we really don't understand their environment very well. And until we do, we're going to continue to get things wrong. So sound is a really important factor. And I'll give you another example, what we picked up and seen a few times now. is like we had a deployment on a creel over the west coast, and as many of the creel fishermen know quite well, seals are very, very good at coming in now and actually taking the bait out of the creels, and they can open a parlor pot and kind of get in at it, and it's fascinating the way they've done that. So we had this seal visit this creel, and up until the point that the seal visited, the creel was actually quite a busy place. There was lots of little fish swimming around and all the rest. And then for 4 hours afterwards, it was like high noon in the Western, where you just saw the tumbleweed rolling past. Everything cleared out. And it was because obviously the seal's a top predator in that environment. But the impact that they can have is significant. And because we're up here and they're down there, and we've no way of knowing. So it's learning those types of things are really important to help us do the job better.
Yeah, no, it's a good point you raised there. The part that annoys me about that reference with the seals, Tom, is we have maybe scientists telling us one thing and fishermen telling something, but with the seals, it's the actresses and models and rock singers that
Yeah,
we have to contend with who know nothing about it.
and that's the modern world we kind of live in, Jim. Unfortunately, yeah, it's about kind of your celebrity status, and if you're a celebrity, people will listen, and if you're somebody that knows what they're talking about, and you're just getting on with your job, people pay less attention to it, for sure. But like we have take seals as an example. We've over the last number of years, we've had a lot of seals come visit us on camera, so to speak, um, and they're fascinating creatures. They're amazing creatures. You got to respect them. That yeah, what they can do and how they've learned to adjust to fishing and their own environment and the changing environment um, is it beggars belief. It's far more than what I ever thought would be possible, um, and yes, the number of seals is increasing in certain parts of the world, and there's no doubt about it. Seals have to eat something to survive, and very often it's going to be fish. But what I've seen is they'll always try and take the easy option if they can. And if you've got a fishing boat and there's fish coming out of the net, or there's a point where they can easily access the fish, then they will learn to take advantage of that. And we got a video a couple of years ago with a seal that swam right down to the cod end, and like an Olympic swimmer, when it hits the wall, it kind of just spins and uses that bounce to kick off the wall. It did that right at the end of the cod end, came back out, and the camera was looking into the cod end, and the seal comes out, and he almost winked at us to kind of go, did you like that turn? And then he just opened his mouth and grabbed the fish and swam out. And I'm convinced he knew what he was doing. Well, I'm saying it's a he, it could have been a she, but it was like I was out with Ian on that particular day, and the two of us looked at each other and went, "Do you know what? Good luck to him. Fantastic. If they can do that, he can have that particular fish." But yeah, there's a lot of seals out there, and they will and do have a significant impact on the total kind of biomass of the production from fish.
That's taking care of my next question, because when you were saying that, I was going to ask you, was it by any chance with Ian, because he was telling me about that situation where and they could swim fast enough to come out after they got in.
It's not only that, Jim. What you'll get sometimes, and particularly in the extension. and if you're working a long extension, it it'll be a bit like a valve where it kind of almost closes down on itself. So in that case, you're having to push through something that you can't necessarily see what's on the other side. And if there was any kind of claustrophobia in the animal, you just wouldn't do it. But they're comfortable with that. And, let's not forget that these animals need to breathe fresh air. So they could potentially drown if they get something wrong, but they don't because they're clever. They're very, very clever, and really comfortable with it. And I've seen other videos where the seal will use his front paw, to just hold on to the net, and then maybe sit over the square mesh panel or some other part of the net where the fish are escaping or getting out, and it'll just go, thanks very much. And it's a bit like being in one of those sushi bars, and you've got this conveyor belt of fish just coming past you, and you help yourself to it, and they've worked it out.
It's quite incredible. I was going to ask you what next for CatchCam Technologies, but I suppose in the world of technology, whoever knows what's next, because it'll be firing at you constantly like a gun.
Yeah, it is. I suppose we're fortunate enough at this point in time where there is a lot of interest in what's going on underneath the water and understanding things, um, and yeah, that's a growing area, and we're well positioned to kind of help with delivering that. And I guess the big thing really that I see for us as a business, more collaboration, working with different kind of partners to come up with solutions. And one of the key areas for us will be kind of going with live stream systems, so that if you're a fisherman, you're sitting, and you're skipper, you're sitting in the wheelhouse, and you've got 10 screens in front of you. That's where we need to be able to see what's going on underneath the net, not when you've hauled back up and you want to look back over it. Because if you were going to make a decision, it would have been better if you made it 2 hours ago when whatever happened. So really, we've got to make that information available in a live kind of view, and we're looking at acoustic technology for delivering this. It's that technology is used in the fishing industry, has been for some time. If you've got ScanMar equipment, or if you've got Marport or whatever, then that kind of acoustic technologies is used to support that. So really, we're just kind of tapping into that. We're not reinventing the wheel, but we're looking at delivering those pictures or that information on the depth of the water, temperature of the water, turbidity of the water, salinity, whatever else you need. Get it in front of you in real time. And then I think the other thing is to get it to him in a way. And going back to my previous point about the fisherman that said he'd got time to glance at something, well, we can't give him ones and zeros. We've got to present this information to them in a way that they understand and can absorb it really quickly. And that's a real challenge. That is probably one of the greatest challenges, and we'll be working on that, I think, for some time to come. But we're making some inroads with it, and hopefully, over the next kind of 12 months, we'll see some progress there as well. But yes, plenty to get at, Jim. There's some mad harebrained stuff as well in there, which I'm probably as guilty as anybody for coming up with. But you've got to try some of these mad things from time to time, and some of them do pay off. So we're always looking for kind of innovation and people who have a particular problem, and are looking, they're struggling with it and they're looking for somebody to help them. I think some of the madder projects are the ones that I personally enjoy the most because I'm learning, and it's a challenge, and I get my kicks from that, and I know the other guys as well are of a similar view. So yeah, we're certainly open to any challenges folk want to throw at us in that regard. But we'll never be bored, Jim. That's for sure.
No, no, I can see that. I can understand that. One, just going back slightly to when you mentioned, well, in fact, two of the boats you mentioned, Ian Whiteman and the Clyde, and Sandy West with the Virtues. I take it they'll, for the size of their gear, there'll be much different cameras go on each boat for the size of the gear and.
Uh, no is the honest answer to that. Big and why would that be, Tom? Well, it's the system's kind of designed to be quite small and flexible. Um, and I guess, the gears are different, so there's got to be a difference. And the difference then comes more around where you put it on the gear and how you put it on the gear. And Ian's net compared to Sandy's would be a bit smaller for sure. Um, so you would kind of deploy it in a slightly different way. But the technology itself probably doesn't vary. Where we look at varying is if somebody's gone out to the deeper water. So we've got two types of cameras. We've got one which is the standard, and it'll work, most of the waters around the UK, and it'll go to 300 meters. But we've got another version which goes to 800 meters. So, if you're going out off the shelf and you're at 500 meters or whatever, then yes, you'll need the deeper rated version, but it's pretty much exactly the same inside. Now, if you were at the creels and you wanted to see what, how your creels perform, and that's a fascination in itself. I've watched hundreds of hours of this, and yeah, that's a show on its own. But in that regard, you don't need as much equipment. You can get in and do that at a lower price point and with less kit, because you're not giving it the same kind of treatment, so you don't need the same amount of protection, etc., etc. So yeah, it's what we've tried to design is something that will work across all types of gear type, and then it's adding in the bits to make it work in specifically that area is really what we've worked on.
Yeah. And going on from that, Tom, do you see an application where it could be a help in safety as well as, say, productivity, and catch rate and things?
There is, I suppose, an application in terms of if you've got the fishing gear, your fishing gear in the right place, then you're not going to get snags and come foul and all the rest of it. So there's certainly safety aspects there with it, but really, I think the big move forward with safety and cameras has been deck cameras. And like I described, when Sandy's hauling up and the fact that he's controlling the winch, he sees where each of the men was. And he roared at me a couple of times to get out of the way. But he was doing it because I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And with that kind of camera technology, he was able to do that. So I think that's really where I would see the kind of camera stuff coming in and having the biggest impact on the safety.
Yeah, yeah. What's your thoughts on the ethical implications of technology in the areas?
Phew, that's a very philosophical question, Jim. That's a good question. I, I suppose,
Just like,
I've always been a firm believer that tech, technical creep and technology was seen as a bad thing in fishing and fisheries management for a very, very long time. Um, if we go back to the 80s and the Northeast in particular, and there were many, many boats fishing in the Northeast and fishing for cod and haddock and whitings and groundfish, etc. And there was a working practice up there, and I know this because the fishermen told me about it. Um, and they would sail on a Sunday night because they wouldn't sail before midnight. So the fleet would sail Sunday night. They'd get out, they'd be fishing for a couple of days. They'd get their catch and fill up as quickly as possible. And they would look to kind of get in Wednesday night for Thursday market, get to Thursday then to sort out any issues with gear or hydraulics or whatever else needed maintenance, etc. And then they would be home and getting into the caravan and going away for the weekend. And the mentality there was, we'll catch enough to pay the bills and to live our lives, but at the end of the day, your life also included looking after your family and getting home and spending time with them. And they were getting better and better at that. Where, and I remember one of the fishermen in particular, Sandy Alexander, was saying like every weekend was a holiday, and it was a brilliant way of life
uh-huh.
for them. And yes, they were making money, but he said if we were greedy, we would have turned around and went back out again. But we understood that we had enough, and we could then go and do the other thing. So to kind of get back to the point, in my view, if we can get the technology to help us to catch what we need to catch, um, and do that as quickly and as efficiently as possible, I think we'll start to address some of our real big issues that we're facing in the industry. And one of the biggest, as you well know, we've talked about, is crew, and getting young men and women into this industry to want to go and be our future. You're addressing some of the other issues in terms of the CO2, because quite frankly, we're spending less fuel to catch what we're allowed to catch. So that's a good thing. Um, in terms of the kind of gear and some of the plastic that's going to be lost and all the rest of it, you've got far less impact there as well. So it's win-win-win, and the technology can help us deliver that, because we're all working within a management system now that's very, very clear about what we can and can't catch, what the limits are. So based on good science and a strong management system, if I can be more efficient, then that's a good thing. And to some extent, the pelagic fleet have done that. And CO2 wise, you get a mackerel, a herring. There isn't a product on the planet that's a whole lot better in terms of CO2. So it works there. It can work for the whole industry, and technology can help us get there. So yeah, that's kind of how I reconcile that one, Jim. Hopefully, I've answered your question, and if I haven't, then please feel free to come back.
Tom, honestly, I thought that's a fantastic answer. And and I genuinely mean that, one of the things that I know exactly what you're saying, and I've heard it many times before, is your point you made about Sandy Alexander, when, as they say, and it's just very much about the fisherman mentality. If they were greedy, they would be going back out, not away for their weekend in the caravan. And also, I would say I don't like answering or putting words into your mouth, as we would say here, but I bet you have never had a fisherman inquiring but how your technologies can catch the last fish.
No, because none of them want that, Jim. It doesn't. It doesn't work. It doesn't stack up, and that I can get on several soapboxes, as you well know, but that really kind of riles me. Is this whole thing that the fishermen are the enemy? They're not, and the other thing is like pitting fishermen against fishermen, where I'm a static guy and I'm a mobile guy, or I work dredges and you work lines or all the rest. We're all fishermen, and we've got to look after each other. And we do things in different ways for very good reasons, but we're all out there trying to make a living out of the job, and none of us are interested in catching the last fish. And actually, some of us go to great lengths to avoid that. And when I say some, I probably mean most. I'll give you an example. Back when I was a young fella again, and that wasn't yesterday before you say it, but we used to, we had a scheme back out Kilmore where we were V-notching lobsters. This is kind of nearly 40 years ago. It was one of the first outside the US. And I remember whenever we'd catch a small lobster, the old fella and me, we'd V-notch it. Because, okay, we knew it was 7 years for that to kind of grow out, is roughly what they said. And this was American kind of scientists that had given us this information. And okay, I wouldn't be able to catch it for 7 years. But, the thought in my head was, well, God, when I could catch that in 7 years' time, that'll be a good lobster. That'll be worth having. And actually, it'll maybe have bred for a few years. So, there's things we do that maybe aren't as sustainable as they should be, but it's not through I've thought about this and I want to do it badly. It's because some of the things we haven't even thought about because it's such a big and broad subject. But where we do understand the basics, um, fishermen are some of the most sustainably minded folk that I've ever met. And yeah, I think they deserve credit for the efforts that they do, and the maligning that goes on at the moment is wrong and it should stop. And I would also say again that, as fishermen, whether you're static, mobile, or doing whatever you're doing, we should stick together and watch each other's backs.
No, all good. Yeah. Uh, See, I suppose the modern term would be collaboration, but I just picture knowing fishermen as well as I do. I wouldn't be surprised if you were to say that they're as helpful in you going forward with technology as your own experience on the technology side.
No, without doubt, Jim. Yes, we couldn't do the job we do without kind of input from the fishermen, and it's the best bit of the job. Very often is just talking to the fishermen, and for a lot of the guys, you're sitting there and you're in the seat, and there's obviously a lot going on around, but you've a lot of time to think about things. And dream things up or whatever and wonder about this and wonder about that, and that's the catalyst for us doing what we're doing. It's very often somebody else's idea, and we just try and bring the technology and make it happen with the experience that we've built up over the years. But yeah, the fishermen are the key player in all of this. And I'm sure if you spoke to a net maker or a door manufacturer or Marport or Faruno or Simrad or all these other companies, they'll tell you the same. they're maybe not as close to the deck as what we are, because we're a small company, and we get out a little bit more with it, and that's to our advantage for sure. And I would never want to be that big company where we couldn't do that, because, well, we've kind of maybe lost the plot a little bit there. But that interaction with the fishermen is so important. And yeah, I really enjoy it, that's for sure.
I'm sure you do. I can hear that loud and clear. Sorry for putting you on the spot, but I'm picturing CatchCam, the team, developers, and your fishing background. Love to be a fly in the wall when you're all round the table. How would the chat go?
Um, that's a good question, Jim. There's usually quite a bit of banter there, for sure. But I think it's like, I guess my role within the business is very much that link between what the customers want, and bringing that back into the business and talking to the other guys around what's technically feasible, whether there's a market. Yeah, that one guy might want it, but for this product to be a success, we'd need to sell 100. Is there 100 people like him out there, or is there just one like him out there? So a lot of the time we look at kind of challenging each other, and working out whether something is possible. And we also have our kind of roadmap, where we want to be with our kind of precision fishing kind of vision for the future, where the fishermen are aided by the technology. And I don't know, if somebody wanted to go and do something that in the oil industry, for argument's sake, just picking something up here, and there was lots of money in it, and there was lots of technical interest stuff, but does that get us to where we want to be as a business? And if the answer to that is no, then the answer is no, and we'll say thank you very much, but no thanks. We're not going to do that. So yeah, we're a small team. We're pretty tight. We do make sure that we're on the same page as much as we can be. And we know where we want to get to, and I think that makes things very good to work together. There aren't agendas and the politics and all the rest. So yeah, those conversations generally, I think the good thing is you're not overly surprised. You've got a fair idea the answer you're going to get, and that's a good sign of a kind of a team that know each other and trust each other. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Very much so. When you, one of the things I have to say, I like listening to you, Tom, is it's not you. I don't even very seldom, if ever, I can't think of remember you once mentioning me, but you're always talking about team. And as a very good friend of mine, Jimmy Buchan, I'm sure you know Jimmy well. As,
I know, Jimmy.
as,
Yes, who doesn't?
that's right. As Jimmy says, there's no I in team.
And he's dead right. And I
And
know Jimmy knows that very
yeah,
well.
and the thing that I always think about, and I have to confess, I've been thinking about it listening to yourself, Tom. I don't know if you're a football man, but I'm very much a Celtic man. And in the past, I've had the great fortune to have met and be close friends with as my brother, older brother David, a couple of years older than me, once says to me, he says, "I'm quite jealous." He says, "You're sitting there, you're Polly with your boyhood heroes. Now that was Stevie Chalmers and Bobby Lennox from the Lisbon Lions,
Well,
Tom, and
yes, yes,
and
yes.
I actually, I was at that time I was doing hospitality in Celtic Park, and I had a number of different offices around the country when I was in, agent boat fishing boat agency, fish selling. I took all the managers and key people. We took the box for a time, and I took Stevie and Bobby along. Well, honestly, Tom,
Ugh,
when you talk about business, it was fantastic because they were talking about, and it's you'll see, it's to me, it's just absolutely the same when you say team, because I loved talking to them and listening, or not talking to them, listening to them about the old, going back to Steen days with Jock Steen,
yeah,
asking them about this guy, that guy. And as they said, well, as far as Steen was important, it's not the person who can score the most goals. He says he wanted somebody that could tackle. He wanted somebody that could
mm,
pass the ball. He wanted somebody that could run it. That to him was a team. And I thought, what a great message to get across to any team.
yeah, yeah. Well, we'll have a Celtic love in here, Jim, if you want. Yeah, I'm a big Celtic fan myself, and I'm also jealous of you. And yeah, that was some team, and they were all local boys, and like I grew up in Ireland playing GAA Gaelic football, and I was loved hurling, absolutely loved it. Best sport there is in the world. And most folk listening won't know what I'm talking about, but a fantastic sport. But the way it used to work was you came from your parish and you played for your parish. And you didn't play for, you didn't go somewhere else. And back in those days, those were all local boys, and to some extent, the Busby Babes as well. They were local boys that kind of grew up together within, you know, a couple of miles of each other, and they became champions of Europe or the world or whatever. And it was about teamwork. Absolutely, 100%. It was about that teamwork and guys dying for each other, literally. Um, in terms of out on the pitch and not leaving anything behind. And I don't know if you kind of listen to the rugby a whole lot, Jim, but in the Ireland are doing well at the moment, and they've got a mantra, and I think it's a really, really good one. And it's be the best you can at the things that don't take any skill. So if you're on the ground, get up as quick as you can, get back into position. That doesn't take any skill. If you're tackling somebody, hold on as tight as you can. That doesn't take any skill. Um, you know, being in the right place at the right time, that doesn't take skill. Now, maybe kicking a ball 40 yards and getting it to bounce twice and then go over the line, that takes a lot of skill. And there's only certain people can do that. But 99% of the game, actually, when they break it down, doesn't have that really skillful level to it. And the mantra is to be as good as you can at the thing that doesn't take skill. And I think that's a great lesson. We're getting into philosophy here again, but that's a great lesson in life, in general, and for teams in particular. And yeah, the teamwork makes the dream work. That's certainly something that I've kind of seen through my life and will continue to kind of follow as long as I can.
The only thing I would say is takes another dimension into it when you mentioned when you take rugby into it is built like a brick shit house and still doing the 100 yards in less than
Ah,
10 seconds.
you wonder when you look at some of these guys, what was so I coach football and rugby, so I'm living in Hull and kind of got sucked into rugby league is the big sport here, and I love it because it's a really honest sport and everything else. But so last Sunday I was coaching football, and we're not talking about seafood here, but anyhow we're talking, so that's the main thing. And so my youngest lad's playing under 15s, and we played a local team on Sunday, and these lads were 14, and they were bigger than I was. There was one lad, he was 19
Oh,
stone
gee.
at 14 years of age, and he could move, Jim. And it's like, what are they feeding him on? Because, I didn't, yeah, different world than when I was growing up, that's for sure. So, yeah, the rugby guys are a different breed altogether, and you got to take your hat off to them. They take some punishment, they get up and they go again, and that's what I love to see. That's the spirit I love to see in people.
My good fortune when I was playing football was I was quite fast, and I'm a lefty, so very left-sided. So, and there wasn't too many of them around, so I could always get outside left. I don't think kids now would know what that position.
Not a chance, not a chance. But the outside left guy was the guy that get you off your seat more often than not. There was a skill and the ability to stroke a ball and curl a ball and everything else. For some reason, the lefties were always better at it than the righties. I don't know why, but yeah, watching a good outside lefty, and we had a fair few with Celtic over the years. There were, yeah, the poetry in
Well,
motion.
my claim was I started as outside left, then I went to left half, which nobody would know now. And as I was getting older, then I was left back, and then I was left behind when they were traveling.
Yeah, I was waiting for that one, Jim. I've been told that a few times myself. What position are you playing today? We're playing left back. Yeah, left back in the dressing room was usually the answer.
Yeah, going back to the day job, what piece of advice would you give to anybody sort of with an entrepreneurial spirit? What would you recommend their journey?
Well, I don't know if I'm the right person to be giving advice on it. I'd say probably listen. You need to have that spirit to get knocked down and get back up again. And if that's not for you, it's probably yeah, it's not going to work. And belief in yourself and back yourself. And sometimes you'll get it wrong. Everybody gets things wrong. We all make mistakes every day. The key thing's learning from your mistakes and don't make the same ones twice. And probably having a trusted team around you that you can talk things out. You'll know from your own experiences, Jim. You didn't do everything. You might have been the man kind of that people saw and the face of things, but you weren't lumping the boxes around. You weren't sorting out all the payments and all the rest. You had a team of folk behind you, but that only works if you trust those people and also if those people trust you. So kind of having good people, and you'll have good people if you treat them right. That invariably is kind of how it goes. So if you're good to folk and respect them, then they will return that. And those could be the people working for you, or they could be your customers, or they could be your suppliers. So yeah, I would treat everybody with respect, and you won't go far wrong in life.
You know, I love the use of that word, the words that you don't hear so much now, but I think they're so important. Trust and respect.
Aye, unfortunately, it's not what society's telling us now, and that's wrong. And look, I don't want to get into all that kind of nonsense. I'll just end up depressing myself. But with core values, and that's something we've got in fishing, Jim, and that's what makes it a great industry, and the people so great. And yeah, we need more of it. It's as simple as that. And please God, we will get it.
With it being such a fast paced field, Tom, how do you balance work and life? And you're talking about Sandy Alexander fishing and then going away on the caravan. How would you sort of balance your work and life?
The honest answer is badly, Jim. Yeah, I think my mother done too good a job on me when I was a young fella, and she was firm believer in kind of work and hard work and what have you. And I don't relax very well. Um, my relaxing is something like this now. I really enjoy just sitting and having a yarn with yourself, and so that's great. The other thing then is probably my sport. I'm involved with the kids, the football, rugby, as I mentioned. Season is starting for rugby league this weekend, so I'll be across to that. But I'm one of these kind of restless souls that just has to be doing something. It does my head in. Sit like going flying somewhere and you're sitting on an airplane and you can't do anything. It's torture as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I struggle a bit with the kind of relaxing, but I've kind of learned to kind of do still relax and do things that maybe aren't at the high octane pace that maybe the day job's at. And this getting involved coaching kids at sport and whatever, that's very, very rewarding. I really enjoy it. The result doesn't matter. It's kind of seeing these lads kind of grow and get better. Those are the important things. So yeah, that's probably my biggest and kind of best hobby or
Yeah.
release, as they
The
say.
team you mentioned as well, which we've discussed, what's the team made up of? And you're a co-founder, so obviously not the only.
Yes. No, I'm not. There's a couple of other guilty parties. So we've got Grace Ailman, who is originally from Argentina, and she's like the mommy bear, looks after us all and keeps us all on the straight and narrow. And then there needs to be a genius behind everything we do, and that's Chris Lewis. Chris is probably one of, if not the best engineer I've ever come across. I've met some fantastic engineers, and they're good at a particular thing. Chris is one of these guys that is good at almost everything. And from our point of view, we're blessed to kind of have his skills and his knowledge and his experience, and he's passionate as well about this. He's not just an engineer that likes tinkering with things. He's really passionate about making the difference, in the kind of marine world and space, and has been working in that for some time. And then we've got Rossiter. I'm sure many of your listeners will have seen the videos and the tweets and the Facebook posts and all the rest. And Rossiter is responsible for those and does a fantastic job. You have to blow your own trumpet a little bit nowadays. And Rosita has got a fine pair of lungs on her, and she blows ours loud and clear. And yeah, that's a credit to her. So we're a small team. We've got other guys we kind of bring in from time to time that are very, very good at what they're doing. But as a core team, there's the four of us.
That sounds impressive. And what it reminds me of when you say there about the engineer, it's stories. I love to have this kind of story because do you find, well, I certainly do, as I get older, you go to school and you're probably doing badly, but you're supposed to try. And academics is clever, is all about academics and how good you are at exams and how what you pick up as far as O levels or higher, as all that sort of thing as you're going. Not that I'm knocking it in any way, but as I get older and you're working with people and different tradesmen, and you'll see a builder in something, or a joiner, or an engineer, I started I would say my view on the word clever has completely changed. And when I see things that guys are doing with their hands, I associate that now as clever.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I really couldn't, and I think we've lost an appreciation for that, Jim. And there's been a big push to get everybody to go to university and be academic, but people aren't like that. That's square pegs in round holes, and you've got a kid who can't operate in that world, but there's another world out there, and they can be the best at it, and it can be a brickie, it can be an engineer, it can be a fisherman, and to see
Yeah.
him at work is poetry in motion. It's like Jinky Johnson just running down the touch line, and he's leaving lads in his wake, and he's probably another lad that in school wouldn't have made anything of it, but put a football boot on him and send them out there, and he entertained hundreds of thousands, and yeah. So I think we have focused too much on the academic stuff. Yes, you need to be able to read and write and do all the rest, but in my career, I've employed a lot of people, and I've been to university myself, and what I've found and the way I look at it is, and I'm probably wrong here and doing it a disservice, but it tells me you can read and write to a very good level. But I can't remember very much of what I learned in university. But I can tell you, in everywhere I've worked over the years, I've learned a hell of a lot more. And those are the things I use every day. My university degree, no, I don't. It opened up doors, for sure it did. But actually, it's the university of life is the best university you'll ever go to. And my own son now, he's coming to the point of finishing up school, and what's he going to do? And
Absolutely.
he's wanting to be an apprentice. Good luck to you. Go out and do it. And you know what? If you don't like that in a couple of years down the line, you can change your mind. But actually, it's a great way to go make a living and go and do whatever you want to do. And it's underappreciated. There's no doubt about it. So yeah, I'm with you 100% there, Jim. It's great to see somebody good at their job working,
Well,
because they
as well
make
as
it look
that, do you
so
not?
so
The thing
easy.
that I find a fascination, and you'll get visitors watching somebody fill it in, even things like that. And the thing that I
Mm.
find fascinating about that, Tom, is we could be watching somebody working, and we've never ever seen that been done before. But you can take one look at them and you know he's good at it. Although you don't know, you don't know what he's doing. You couldn't do
Yeah,
it.
yeah. And Philipton's probably a very good example. And I think you and I maybe spoke about it when we were in Glasgow the other week. But like, some of the best filleters are actually ladies, and like the movement, the I used to have a factory and we were filleting, and the yield improvement from the female to the males was half to
Yeah.
1%. So, well, that's money in the bank by just having these very good female filleters on your team rather than the men. Now, the men could handle maybe some of the bigger sprags that the females couldn't. So you needed a bit of a balance and back to teamwork in that. But the skill, it's mesmerizing. You could literally stand there and watch them and kind of go, how do you do that? I just couldn't do it. I'm a butcher when it comes to kind of anything like that, and I have done a bit of butchering as a young fella, but yeah, the skill involved in filleting is just mesmerizing.
Another thing that I feel that it reminds me of when And even when you mentioned it, the engineering is there was a old boat, or it was a boat. Well, I don't know if you remember it, the Viga. He's in Shetland,
I
and
don't
it
know.
was it was a fair age, and it was coming into Scrabster a lot. I was selling his fish. I was agent for that Shetland boats, and there was an engineer in Scrabster. The company's E&M Engineering. Willie Reed, very friendly with still, and you'll get this, Tom. He said to me once, he says, "See that guy there, Billy, the engineer, the chief engineer." He said, "That guy's kept that boat going for the last
Mm.
10 years." He said, "Parts are obsolete. You can't get parts." And he said he's some that he's needing. He's either made or he's converted something. He said he's kept that boat going for 10 years.
And the value in that you can't even begin to manage. But for that man, the
Mhm.
pride he gets from that, of being able to keep that going and know that he's doing that, that's what drives these guys. It's not the money. It's that pride in what they do, and that boat sailing into Scrabster with a big landing that's going on the market, and everybody else is kind of saying that should be in the scrap heap, and it's going, well, look what's in the hole, boys. And as all the fishermen will tell you, it's what comes out of the cod end that pays all our bills, and pays for you and me and everybody else. So if you've got an engineer that can keep an old boat like that going, that's sustainable as well, Jim, because that boat is getting more value and is not being replaced, and all the kind of resources put into a new boat. That's actually more sustainable than buying a more efficient new boat in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, those
Yeah.
guys, unsung heroes, and yeah, we don't appreciate them
Indeed. And
enough.
even taking it back to a fishing term, my good friends that I mentioned, Stevie and Bobby, he said, I mean, as far as they were concerned, they played for the jersey, they played for the colours, the badge, and as you say, the money. They got £250 bonus when they won the European Cup. Can you imagine the bonus that winners of the Champions League will get
Oh,
now?
but it's a different world now. Those guys would have went home to their mammies after training instead of off to wherever,
Yeah.
golf clubs or spas, or it's a totally different kind of world, and for the worst in my view. But I'm a bit of a dinosaur in my own
I had
ways
them up
too.
north here, and I took them to a game. And of course, you could imagine the local guys just thought it was the Messiah arrived. And but when they came back,
Yeah,
we come back home, and they were no, we're not very impressed. It's far too much of the pub. He says we leave we're talking about Celtic Park. They would just say we leave the
yeah,
park and just go home.
yeah, yeah.
And
I
also when a few of the foreign players started arriving, the Decanios and people like that, they would say no, no, they play for themselves, not the
And
team.
that's true, and that was my experience as well, kind of growing up. And it's where you're from, and it's the value of that, and it's the people you grew up with. And we've lost it and are losing it, and sad for me, to be honest. I think it's not the right way, but it's the way of the world now, and I don't think you or I are going to change it.
Where do you see? What's your vision? Where do you see both the industries you're in? I suppose technology be an impossible thing for the future for the fishing industry and technology. Where do you see us go?
Well, I agree with you. The technology stuff, who knows that, we're going to see a lot more AI, just that whole computers being able to do things for us, and there's some good in that, but there's potentially some bad in it as well. But the same could be said, for anything. You give a tool to a man, if it's a hammer, he could go and build a house with it, or he could go out and kill somebody with it. It's not the tool's fault. um but yeah, I think we're going to continue to see massive changes in terms of the technology, and AI being the big one. Fishing,
Yeah,
uh, I'm kind of sad to where we've got to. It's not right. And it's yeah, it does, it really makes me sad to see where we are now. But I'm optimistic, and I'm optimistic for the simple reason that we're a primary producer. We're producing a food product that is better than most in many, many ways. And people, whether you like it or not, you could have the best AI in the world, you could have the finest car in the world, but you have to eat, and you have to, drink water or whatever to
yeah,
live. So food's always going to be required. Population's growing, all the rest. So yeah, that kind of is a fact that I hang on to, and we are seeing pricing increasing, and a truer value and reflection being put onto food. And I'll give you a fact, and you probably know this yourself, but if you go back, and in 1979, the average percent of the household weekly income spent on food, I believe, and this is me from my sea fish days, it was somewhere around 13%. By 2015, it was around 5% or thereabouts. So we've got away from value in food, but I think we're starting to come back to it now. And fish, well, when I was growing up, lobsters, and we're paid in the old Irish punt per pound weight rather than kilos, but we were getting £5 a pound. It's not a whole lot more than that nowadays, and that's 40 years ago.
yeah,
So, the value of the products got to go up. And I think it is going up. And we're seeing it in prawns. We're seeing it in the white fish at the moment, and crab and so on. So, those two things on their own give me optimism. Um, but I think we're in for more changes. Uh, a big part of the Irish industry and the Scottish or UK industry are family owned businesses. uh, that's going to be more difficult to do, because a lot of the families, we haven't got the sons, the next generation coming through. So we'll probably see more centralized, larger businesses kind of take over. And we've had the likes of Stevenson's for a number of years in Cornwall, the Carter's Green Dance, and so on. So I think we'll see a bit more of that. But there really has to be and will be a place for the smaller local vessels. They're still family owned, that are absolutely the beating heart of the fishing communities. And if we can get the value of the product to where it needs to be, so these men and women can make a proper living, then I think we can attract the crews of the future and the skippers of the future as well, because we're in a very, very precarious position at the moment, where there are very few young guys and girls coming in. And that just makes things difficult, and we need to get that sorted sooner rather than later. And that's not something, Jim, you can do or I can do per se. I think it's really around that market conditions kind of prevailing, and getting the job to a point where it's attractive to the young guys and girls to get stuck into. And it is, and it's got so many benefits aside from the money side of things. It's the best job in the world. So yeah, I'm positive, but we're not without our challenges. I think we need to stand together, shoulder to shoulder, and tall, and be very proud of what we do. And there's some guys, yourself included, and what you're doing here in this podcast is absolutely fantastic. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on here. I think there's history in what you're doing. There's natural science in what you're doing. There's education in what you're doing. And there's pride, and that's something we need. And you're doing a fantastic job, you and Ashley, with kind of bringing that into the industry. So I think credit to you there on that, and we need more of it. And I'll certainly be pushing for others outside of the UK, because we've got fishermen outside of the UK that facing similar battles. But I think places like the US and Canada and Australia or wherever, they should be looking at this and kind of going, do you know what? Jim's onto something here. We can capitalize on this. So yeah, hats off to you there. You've pulled your weight, Jim. That's for sure. And these types of yarns with you are always very welcome. And yeah, get my number, give me a phone. That's probably the best way of following me, I would say. I'm maybe making a rod for my own back there, but I'm a bit old fashioned that way.
Yeah.
So it's CatchCam, CatchCam.tech, TECH. So yeah, you'll get us on there, and yeah, we've got email, and as I said, the phone's there too. So far prefer to speak to folk. And thank you, and keep up the good work. You don't fully understand how valuable this is as a kind of service, for all the reasons I've just said. And yeah, please do keep going. You're the voice of the industry now in a lot of ways, and it's a very, very entertaining voice to listen to, and the stories and the characters you bring on and all the rest. Yeah, it's brilliant. So please keep it up.
Thank you very much. It's been great having the chat with you.